Hi, my name's Ethan Wind. I'm a rising junior in Sanford H. Calhoun High School, and this is the second video for the Next Generation Business Network. And today we're going to be talking about the team decision making events and the role plays and some advice, tips, and tricks that you can kind of utilize in your role plays so that you can hopefully make it to ICDC. I'm here with Neel and Mithil, and they both placed first in the Entrepreneurship Team Decision Making event. They also co-founded Code for Cause, which is a nonprofit program introduced to youth for hacking and coding. And they recently developed something that I think is really interesting. It's a competition where if you make the best video game that helps students understand financial literacy, you can win the prize that's offered. So I'm going to put the link down to that as well in this video, and I think you guys should check that out. So do you guys want to introduce yourself a little bit?
I'm Neel. I'm a senior at Basis in Penn Silicon Valley, a 4-year DECA member.
And I'm Mithil, same thing. I'm a senior at Basis Independent Silicon Valley. Been doing DECA for 4 years. It's been a great journey.
I feel like when students join DECA, they might be overwhelmed with all the different terms and sections and events. There's over 50 events, and then they go to their event, and there's the role plays, there's the prepared events, there's the online events, and then in the role play and team decision making events, there are the performance indicators and the 21st century skills. So how did you approach the performance indicators and 21st century skills to ensure that you received as many points as possible?
When it came to the performance indicators, those 21st century skills, a lot of them actually overlap with the skills that are tested in the exams. So what Neel and I usually did before the events, like maybe like 2-3 weeks before the events, we'd start preparing for those exams. And you can find lots of them online. Each cluster has their own, so like marketing will have their own, entrepreneurship will have their own, hospitality and tourism will have their own. And so we found like maybe a good 10 previous entrepreneurship exams online, and we just practiced from there. But even once we finished those 10, we didn't just stop there. We noticed that there's a lot of overlap between the entrepreneurship exam and the marketing exam, and you can check out these overlap by going through the description of the exam. They'll tell you this exam has 20 questions focused on marketing, and that might be the marketing exam, and then the other exam, like the entrepreneurship exam, might have 12 questions focused on marketing. So yeah, essentially what we did, we just practiced those tests, and when we practiced those tests, we learned the skills, and then when we went to the competition, we took those skills to the actual presentation. And then Neel, you want to talk about how we did that last part?
I just want to add one more thing about how we kind of look at tests from other clusters. So at least for me, I don't remember exactly what the topic was, but there was a topic on the entrepreneurship test where I was consistently getting questions wrong. And that topic shows up a lot more in the business administration test. So I started taking a lot more of those. And that's kind of how we chose which, we didn't just do every single test out there because there are too many of them. We kind of had to be strategic with which ones we picked. But once we got to the actual competition, I think our focus was really on the performance indicators. The 21st century skills you kind of do by just answering the performance indicators. They kind of just happen naturally. So we never really intentionally focused on them. But for the PIs, really it's not enough to just answer, right? Because everybody there, once you get to a high enough level like ICDC, right, everyone knows how to answer the PIs. Everyone knows what the PIs mean. It's really how you answer them. And that's why me and Mithil, we focused a lot on being creative and doing things very out of the box, right, unorthodox styles. But I think that's really what sets us apart is we really tried to do things differently from everyone else, and that kind of helped us stand out.
Can I ask a little bit about how students should try to be different when they're discussing the performance indicators with the judge?
Most people, they have their notes and they kind of just give a speech, and then they'll show some visuals. What we did is we just scrapped all the notes and basically made a slideshow on paper, right? And the slides kind of double as one kind of notes for us and 2 visuals for the judge. And I think that lets us kind of get a lot more visuals out, right? We can do a lot more things with the visuals because we're spending all our time on the slides. It's not like we're spending time making notes for ourselves and then also making visuals for the judge. It's kind of all in one. And that gives you a little bit more flexibility to like, do things a little differently, do things somewhat different from everyone else.
Yeah. And I'd like to add on top of that, like in terms of creativity and how you can make your points stand out, like we put together a slideshow, but it's not like the slides were just in any random order. We just went one by one through all the PIs on the slides. No, you have to like connect them together. So I think me and Neel, we had a great sense of like storytelling, like in the case studies, right? They give you like the literal like setting, I guess you could say, of the story, like who you are, where you are, like what market you're in, and what the problem you're facing. And then you just have to retell that story to the judge and then show like how that solution was fixed. And like any good story, you can't just jump from the problem to the solution. You have to like walk them through it. You have to hold the judge's hand and like show them like step by step, what are you going to do? And I think that's what also helped us out a lot.
Yeah, and like one more thing that I think we kind of maybe unconsciously did is like when we gave examples or stuff, we weren't like too academic or too textbook. Like I know I talked about like TripAdvisor's Instagram page in one of our things, like to talk about marketing, or it was kind of just like more like pop culture references, things that judges probably don't usually expect to hear in like a professional role play situation. But I feel like sometimes when you get your point across with things that are more like understandable to the common person, it makes your presentation a lot stronger than if you were using like a bunch of fancy technical terms when you don't really need to.
Yeah. Like we have like so many experiences, and actually a lot of those experiences are really relatable. Like for example, in one of our presentations, I remember saying at the start, like it was something completely, like, it had nothing to do with like space or anything. But I remember saying, since I was a young kid, I really loved space. And I went into like a good like 15 seconds, like I used to have this, I just loved space. And I think the presentation was about like customizable lunch boxes. And so I like eventually looped that into how like I always wanted a customizable lunchbox, but I never had it or something like that. It's like just those little things, like it takes like 15, 20 seconds and you make it more human is what can appeal to a judge.
Okay, so one thing that you guys brought up is doing a slideshow in the role play. And I actually never heard about I've never heard about this method of presenting. So did you guys bring in a computer or did you bring in extra pieces of paper? Like how did the slideshow work and how did you integrate it into your presentation so it it was flowing. It didn't seem so robotic and it stayed away from the thing that you discussed earlier, the jargon, and kind of came more into the connection and like the story.
Yeah, so it's all done on paper, and we kind of like play into like the whole role play thing. Like we'll make a little fake keyboard and a little Apple logo on top and act like we're opening up a laptop. But we kind of just do it all on paper, but we try to act as much as if we were doing like a slideshow on a computer.
You drew the keyboard and the mouse and the
Yeah.
screen and you swapped the paper.
Yeah, a lot of times like the people who are watching over you while you do the notes, they get like kind of pissed at us because we'd use like 30, 35 pieces of paper just for us, and we keep on asking them, could we get more paper? Could we get more paper? Could we get more paper?
Basically, the first thing we do is when we sit down is I raise my hand and I'm like, we need more paper than this. We're gonna need more. They're like, you sure? Like, yes, we know we're gonna take a lot of paper, but it works. So.
And your style for the slides, like what, just like words or pictures or just like notes?
Yeah, everything, like everything you'd expect in like a normal slideshow. Like we put in like little icons, like we'll draw little icons. We might put in like pictures, maybe like charts and whatnot. Same thing you'd expect in a regular slideshow.
And you need a cluster exam score of, I believe, higher than 90, maybe 92-ish region to bring yourself to ICDC. And then you need even a higher score to win the competition. So it's so crucial that you study this cluster exam, the entrepreneurship cluster exam, effectively, and that you're not wasting your time with terms that aren't going to help you for the actual cluster exam. And you also talked about using different cluster exams from different career clusters to study your specific cluster exam. So what tips would you give to someone studying the entrepreneurship cluster exam?
This is TDM specific, but at least what me and Mithil did is we had like a shared Google sheet where we'd like each of us would do our tests, and basically we'd do a test and then we'd go back, see what we got wrong, and kind of make notes for everything we got wrong. And because we both had access to the thing, one, we kept each other accountable, right? Because you can see the other person's done tests. Okay, I need to do a test, right? I'm behind or I'm ahead. But also we kind of see where like the other person's making a mistake. Like I might have guessed a question correct, and when I'm checking it, I'm not going back and seeing, hey, did I actually know this or did I guess this, right? But then maybe Mithil gets the same question wrong, and I go back and I read it and I see his note and I'm like, oh, I didn't know this. And then I kind of make a mental note for that. So it's kind of like we kind of check each other to make sure that we actually truly do know everything.
On the sheet specifically, it was just question number, and then like what we put, what the correct answer was, and then for all the questions that we got wrong, we just fill in, as Neel said, what we thought we messed up on, like what we can learn from that question. And then I would, like Neel would do the same thing if I did it, and then I'd go through his notes, he'd go through my notes. One thing I'd also add on to what Neel said about this test is that there's 100 questions, and like the questions, some are short, some are pretty long, but practicing that stamina is really important. I remember like the first couple of tests I took, like the 90s, like the questions, like the last 10 question, I used to think they were like really, really hard, just because I was getting them wrong.
Yeah.
But I think I was just like tired by the time I got to those questions. My brain wasn't thinking properly. So, just practice doing those questions like in one sitting from start to finish. And once you do that, you can really nail any test.
For 90% of the people who take these tests, right, time is not an issue. The DECA gives you plenty of time. So really don't rush it. I think this is something that admittedly I don't do a very good job of. Usually I like get out of there way too early, and I probably should be reviewing my answers a little bit more, but like use the time. The time is almost never an issue on these tests, right? So like really utilize it. Don't rush yourself, because there's always going to be a few questions which there's nothing. Like I think there was one year where they asked a question about like an ACDAR chart or something, right? And this is something that never showed up. Probably 99.9% of the people don't know what it is. And there are going to be 4 or 5 questions like that, right? So those questions are already either gone or you're guessing on them. So really make sure that you're not dropping any easy questions that you should know, because you really need to be hitting those fine so that you're ready for those that you can't prepare for. I just want to say, like, I'd almost caution you not to try to like read the Wall Street Journal or something, because probably 95% of your time there is just wasted. You're much better off doing the actual DECA practice test, because a lot of the questions, I want to say like maybe 70% of the questions are old questions, right? So that's a lot more efficient use of your time. And then before every competition, I just go through that sheet that me and Mithil made and just review all the mistake ones that we were getting tripped up on. Right. And before every test, not like every practice test I took, like I'll review the old ones, and then before competition, do the same thing. Just like I have those in the back of my mind and I'm like thinking about those, but I would not try to study outside of DECA materials, because I just don't feel like it's an efficient use of your time.
How you approach the 30-minute prep time and how you approach your 15-minute presentation.
Yeah, so at least for me and Mithil, we're both like confident in our ability to speak and come up with things. So I think we've maybe done one practice presentation outside of competition, but really we spent all our time focused on the test, because that also helps you like to get the knowledge for the PIs. But for us, we felt confident in our ability to speak, so that wasn't really an issue. And Mithil, if you want to talk about like the actual in 30-minute prep.
Yeah. So the actual 30-minute prep, of course, like the first thing we do is we read through the case study. I mean, of course, after Neel already asked for paper, right? Then we start reading the case study. There's no like specific way that we read it. We just read the whole thing, like start to finish, and like top to bottom. Neel usually finishes before me, and I like to tell them like to start working on a table of contents for a slideshow. And I think that's really the most important thing for us in those 30 minutes is at the start, centering every little thing that we need to do. Like, sure, it's like a dynamic table of contents. If we come up with new ideas, we'll swap something out. But we come up with a table of contents, and then after those table of contents, like Neel and whoever has like a better idea for each like little piece of the table of contents, we'll pick that out. And then like if there's like a piece of the table of contents, like making like a finance chart or something like that I'm really interested in, I'll be like, let me do that slide. I have a creative idea for that. And same thing for Neel. Another thing about the table of contents that we put together for the slideshow, it really overlaps with the PIs. So if the PIs are like, show this, show this, show this, we'll make sure that those terms are explicitly on the table of contents. And then, from there we kind of split up. Neel and I don't really like, work together that much over the next like 20 something minutes. We just independently like take this slide. And then the thing is, the slides that I put together, right, the visuals that I put together, I'm going to be the one speaking on those. So the same way like you would do an actual presentation, you're not going to put together slides and then give it to someone else to read. We don't do that in our presentation. So I will make that chart, and that way I don't need to put like speaker notes or anything because I already know everything that I want to say for that slide. Same thing for Neel. And then at the end we kind of come together, and then we go over the whole thing. Not like actually presenting it, but I'll be like, so this is this slide, and then we'll kind of work on the transitions there, right? Because you can't just hop in from one topic to another topic. We'll be like, okay, like how do we put this topic together? And then that's usually where like our most creative elements are. We'll like think of an opening hook there, right? Like we'll be like, we can't just hop into this. We have to think of something for it, or like how do we conclude it? Because conclusions aren't really in our table of contents. So little things like that.
Yeah.
That and like even in the table of contents, we might not go like PI, right? We might split one PI into 3 sections in our table of contents or something like that. The PIs kind of guide us, but we make our own table of contents. And then one of the things we also do, like in that last bit where we kind of talk to each other and see like what we do, is we might then go back and be like, okay, let's add some like specific word from the PI into this, just so, like the judge realizes that this is the PI we're trying to address here. But really, we don't let like the wording of the PI or anything really affect us. We really focus more on the content. And I just want to add one more thing about like this table of contents slide that we talk about a lot, right? Maybe half the time, this table of contents doesn't even make it into our presentation, right? Like if it's a really linear progression that like we don't feel like the judge needs to know, we kind of just scrap it. But just having it while we're prepping keeps us on task, and like it's almost like a checklist. Like we can keep track of things, but it might not even make it. We might just scrap it at the end. But yeah, I just want to add that in.
I want to know either what is the biggest lesson you've taken away from DECA, or what is the biggest lesson that you could give to someone else who wants to succeed in DECA.
I think the first is you have to have supreme confidence in yourself, right? Like when we go in to like a DECA competition or really anything, you have to believe that you're the best person in the room, right? Whether you are or you're not is kind of out of your control, but you have to go in with the mindset that, this is possible for me to win. I'm capable of doing this, right? And that, I think like it'll subconsciously project onto the judge, right? Like even if maybe you're not fully certain about PI, if you have that mindset that, I know everything, and like you have that confidence in yourself, the judge will see that confidence. And maybe the judge doesn't even know what the PI fully means, right? But if you project that confidence, they'll kind of take it. And I think the other thing is try not to be stiff and like suck up. Like I see, like I've judged many of our club members in role plays and stuff. And a lot of mistake I see them make is, they're very stiff. They kind of have this thing they want to say, and they're just going to like say it, right? And I think you have to kind of stay loose throughout the whole thing, right? Stay loose. And, if you're confident, you're going to stay loose, and just kind of stay loose, be flexible, be willing to adapt, be willing to change things. Like one of my favorite stories is our final round at ICDC, right? We had our little slides, and somehow, somewhere when we were going through, we had the slides out of order, right? And this is a massive mess up, and Mithil comes in. He's like, oh, the PowerPoint glitched, right? And we kind of laughed it off as like, technology. And it was just because, we had that confidence. We were willing to like adapt. We're flexible enough to just think of that on the fly. And I think that was like something that, really helped us because one, we saved it, but also it kind of has that human element, right? That we're not just robotic speech givers, but we really like know what we're doing and like we're human, right? And I think that really helped us. So that would be my thing.
Yeah, well, I think kind of ties into the last thing that Neel mentioned. I think my biggest takeaway has been storytelling. Like all these like events, you have to sure they tell you what they want to hear, like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, but you have to be able to tie in all those things together. And I think that's what's taught me the most. That's the lesson I've learned the most from DECA, and I've seen it being applied in other places too. Most notably right now in the college applications. Like you can't just say, oh, I have this value, I have this value, I have this value. You have to like tie them together in a story, and I can kind of see like an overlap there. Or for example, for Code for Cause, another thing that we have to do is talk to lots of sponsors, talk to lots of nonprofits, explain to them what we do, like for fundraising and whatnot. And over there, we can't just tell them this is what we do. They like to like hear like, so what? Like, why should we help you and not help someone else down the road? So over there, it kind of helps to tell the story. Okay, this is how we started. This is what we worked into, and we need your help now for this reason. And then you can also give the story of the future with their help versus the story of the future without their help. So yeah, a lot of things like that. Like Neel and I, besides doing ETDM, we've also done a couple of writtens. We've done project management, which is like another, I think, pretty storytelling thing where we have to explain what the problem was of a company and how we helped them solve that problem. Or we also did business growth plan, which was talking about, we had a business, how do we grow that business? Yeah, that would be my biggest takeaway, storytelling.